I would like to extend a warm welcome to all the members of the Planning Committee, officers and members of the public in attendance at today's meeting. I am Councillor Christine Ward, Chairman of the Planning Committee. I would now like to hand over to Democratic Services to read the housekeeping rules.
Please note that this meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's website and on YouTube. It will remain available for a minimum of 12 months. Please can those in attendance use your microphone when speaking and turn it off when you've finished. Please turn any mobile devices to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. If the fire alarm rings, please can everyone leave the room immediately and use the nearest fire exit. Do not use the lift. Please go to the fire assembly point located at the bottom of the car park by the garages.
Thank you. Can we have apologies, please? It looks like there's quite a few this morning.
Sorry, apologies from Councillors Hartman, Hawkins, Wade and Crizell and John Sleep.
Thank you. Members, can you confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of November? Are you in agreement? Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. Councillor Wood.
As Councillor for Fordham Bridge, I declare interest in application 2024-10651. However, I've not been party to any of the council meetings or any of the planning meetings.
Are there any more? We'll now go forward to the presentation. Our first one, the first application is 24/10651, and that's on page 5 of the agenda, the SS17 land to west of Whitsbury Road. Mr. Belli, would you like to go ahead, please? Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, and good morning, members, and good morning, members of the public. I'd like to take you first of all through the update sheet, and then I'll carry on with my presentation following that. Members will have seen the update sheet published. It refers to a number of matters. First of all, in terms of responses, we've had a further consultation response from the Fordham Bridge Town Council, and they've recommended the application is refusal. They've referred to the use of Marl Lane. I'll show members in my presentation where Marl Lane is, but they've referred to the use of Marl Lane for heavy construction traffic, contrary to the construction traffic management plan. The position actually is that we agreed as officers for some minor exploratory works south of the river to test ground conditions pursuant to agreeing the conditions for the permanent bridge and for the details of that permanent bridge. So we agreed those minor works. The only way to get into the site from to the south of the river through the applicant's ownership is via Marl Lane. You can't get into the other side of the river from Whitsbury Road because there is no bridging point. So the works that were agreed were very minor exploratory works. There were no engineering works as such. There was no construction works, and there were certainly no works to infill rubble into the river, and that's been strongly refuted by the applicants who are present today. So there is no substance actually in terms of what the Town Council are saying. The construction traffic management plan shows all construction traffic for the proposal in front of you to be coming from Whitsbury Road. The second consultation response we've received is New Forest District Council's Environmental Protection Team have confirmed that a dust management and mitigation plan needs to be submitted, and that is covered by a condition. And then following on from that, the only other changes to the report are relating to proposed conditions, which are set out on the 2 pages there of the update sheet. Condition 2, just a minor change to one of the bullet points. Condition 3, updating the approved plans list. And condition 4, correcting some minor grammatical changes to condition 8. The other point I would raise as part of an update, but I will cover this in my presentation, is that I'd like to correct some information that's before you on page 14 relating to flood risk. I'll cover that when I come to that part of the report and that part of the presentation. Okay, so I'll proceed now with the presentation, Chairman. The application site edged in red is fronting Whitsbury Road. You can see the actual Swetsford Water River course running through the application site, and this is Whitsbury Road. That's an aerial photograph of the site showing currently that there are some pathways in this part of the site, and there's a bridging point over the river, which is a pedestrian bridging point, not a construction traffic bridging point. This part of the site has been changed recently because of Wessex Water's compound created to install a sewage wet well, which I'll refer to later. So some further context for members. In my report, I refer to various applications and various sites. Augustus Park is the development on the other side of the road. It's not quite showing it in its totality because this Ordnance Survey map is slightly out of date. Augustus Avenue is marked there. The Tinkers Cross development, which is part of Site 17 and is under construction, is in that part of the site. And then that is included in the whole of Site 17. Marl Lane is at the bottom of the screen here. And Puddleslosh Lane runs along this boundary. Again, an aerial photograph showing that in a little bit more detail. So there's the Augustus Park development that I referred to. There's the Tinkers Cross development under construction, and this is Site 17. And our application site is in this corner of Site 17. Okay, putting the strategic sites in context, I'm sure members will recall this slide has been used on a number of occasions previously, showing the three strategic sites: Site 16 off Station Road, Site 17 off Whitsbury Road, and Site 18 land at Burgate. Site 17 then is shown in more detail. So the brown area show the residential zones. This white area is the Augustus Park development, which was approved under an earlier local plan iteration. You can see the floodplain of the river, the Swetsford Water there. So that's put it in context. This is an approved illustrative master plan that flowed out of the application for the 342 dwellings that members have already approved, subject to a legal agreement. This is the plan showing the general layout of the site in terms of where the houses are going to be built. This is a master plan. It's not a detailed plan. That is now subject to reserve matter applications, and the first of those reserve matters is in for this southeast corner of the overall site. This is an approved plan showing the permanent access from Whitsbury Road. So you'll see on the enlarged section there is proposed to be a new roundabout, a road then leading to a new bridge, a two-way bridge over the river, and then quite a long section of access road that runs all the way down to this part of the site to give access to phase 1, and that's the subject of current reserve matters application from the applicants. So that's the approved plan for the road. It's not the final plan, but it is the approved plan. So this puts it into context now with what's currently in front of you today, Chairman. So the applicants are proposing a temporary construction access, which will come in off Whitsbury Road, directly opposite Augustus Park, and it will travel down. It's 170 metres in length in total, and it will have a what's commonly referred to as a Bailey Bridge. It will be a single track bridge, a steel bridge that will be installed over the river, and then this section of road will come in as well. Now, the purpose of this is logistically to try and ensure that there's an ease of progress in terms of the construction of the new road bridge and the roundabout. So the roundabout is in this general location, and then there's the permanent bridge. So this pink area shows the corridor of the permanent new road. So it will allow the applicants to get into the site to actually come the other side of the river, to the south of the river, and then to start to build the road and the bridge from this direction, from the south to the north to Whitsbury Road. So that will ease the logistics significantly in terms of trying to get into the site and build the permanent road details later. So this plan shows the area of land currently in place as a proposed construction vehicle compound for the temporary road and access. It shows a number of parking spaces, 6 parking spaces for smaller vehicles. It shows an office porter cabin. There's an existing access that was made by Wessex Water off Whitsbury Road, and there's a wheel washing facility in that location and a fuel store, which is subject to Environment Agency regulations in that location. And then this part of the site will be used for tipping of overburdened material as they're constructing this new road. So this new road will come in that direction. So that's the construction traffic management plan, and this plan has been agreed by the Highway Authority. But as you can see from that, all construction traffic will be coming in from Whitsbury Road. There's a drainage arrangement plan as well, and at this point I'd just refer to the fact that a lot of the river corridor is actually floodplain. It's class 3 and it's the highest risk of flooding. The permanent bridge and the roundabout and the new road have all been subject to a previous flood risk assessment. The current application has also been subject to a further flood risk assessment. And the applicants have pointed out to me on page 14, where I refer to matters to do with flood risk. They've said there's a misunderstanding perhaps in the report, and they've asked me to just clarify that. So it says it refers to the potential for flooding of the temporary access road itself, where it passes through the floodplain of Stretford Water. The applicants have referred the council to the flood risk assessment, which states as follows. The temporary access road crosses the functional floodplain of Stretford Water. The proposed bridge and the access road have been set above the 1% annual probability event peak flood level, including a 40% allowance for climate change of 30.8 metres above ordnance datum, established for the permanent bridge, consented under the application 21-152, with a freeboard of 300 millimetres to be provided to the soffit level of the temporary vehicle bridge. As such, safe access and egress has been provided during all fluvial flood events up to and including this event. It also says that the risk to the proposed development from various sources of flooding is low or negligible. The engineers for the developers have confirmed that the comment in the report is incorrect, with the above quote setting out the design measures incorporated into the scheme to accommodate potential flood risk and ensure safe access and egress from the road is accommodated. And the key point here, Chairman and members, is that the flood risk assessment, the drainage arrangements have been considered by both the Environment Agency and the Hampshire County Local Lead Flood Authority, both of whom do not object to the application. So, in terms of flood risk, the impact has been considered to be acceptable. The other element of this report refers to recreation land. It used to be called Suitable Alternative Natural Green Space, SAN. It's now called Alternative Natural Recreational Green Space, ANREG. Sorry for the acronyms. The earlier scheme for Augustus Park had an area of land covered as SAN recreational land. Now that recreational land has been prejudiced, first of all by Wessex Water putting in their construction of the sewage wet well. But secondly, the area of land the subject of this application will take up another part of that access facility into the blue area, which is the predominant area of the SAN that related to Ford 1. So the main area for dog exercise is in that location, and then there are some walks with some access points over the river. There are 2 access points over the river. The applicants and your officers have considered how the provision of this temporary access road impacts on that sang land, and there is an alternative availability of recreational land, and that is to do with the Tinkers Cross development. So the Tinkers Cross development is part of Site 17. It was approved with its own ANRG ANREG land, and it was this area here to the south of the residential zone. The residential zone is well under construction, and there's probably only about 6 units that are left to be constructed. However, of the 64 dwellings that were approved, only 14 of those dwellings are currently occupied. So there is an excess of land available in terms of ANREG for those 14 residents. And there is capacity, in other words, Chairman, for recreational lands, because all of this recreational land has already been formed and is open for use and is being used not just by residents who live on the site, but by other members of the public, including, no doubt, Augustus Park residents. So there is some capacity at the moment for the short term whilst this temporary construction access will be in place. So there are no objections in that respect in terms of impact on habitats. Some photographs of the site. So this is standing in Augustus Avenue and looking towards the application site. This is the part of the site where Wessex Water have put their wet well. All the construction traffic, and I think one of the cabins has been moved now. And then this is our current application site. So this part of the site is forming part of that Ford 1 Sang recreational land, and it's accessed through this gateway. And this is the land that will be prejudiced by the current application. So this is further down that path, and it leads to the river bridge. There's a little pedestrian bridge over the river at that point. So, recommendation before you, Chairman, is to approve. The principle of development is established. The temporary road and bridge will be removed and the land reinstated to an agreed plan. There are no technical or policy objections to the application. The Ford 1 Sang compensation will be in place prior to any other highway works. So, in other words, prior to any works on the permanent road, the permanent access over the river and the permanent roundabout, before any of those works take place, the woodland walk will be in place. And the recommendation is therefore subject to the conditions as set out and as amended in the update sheet. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. We have Suzanne Bangert. Is that how you pronounce it? Okay. You all have 3 minutes to speak. And we also have Mr. Guy Pearson-Hager and Jack Higson, who are here to answer questions if needed. So if you'd like to go ahead with your 3 minutes, thank you.
Penny Farthing Homes welcomes this recommendation for approval of the temporary access road and is grateful for the time and effort officers have put in to getting to this point. I'm grateful to Stephen for clarifying the point regarding flood risk that we had responded to. Penny Farthing is keen to deliver the new homes that are so desperately needed in New Forest, and to that end, this application will facilitate commencement of construction of homes at SS17 around 9 months earlier than would otherwise be possible. Penny Farthing intend to bring forward the permanent access road and bridge as soon as possible. However, this requires considerable preparatory work. To facilitate the early delivery of new homes, a simpler type of temporary bridge and road is proposed, which has a much shorter construction programme. On completion of the temporary access, work to construct the permanent access road will take place once detailed planning consent is in place and the required permits obtained. To address impacts on the Ford 1 ANRG that the planning officer has referred to, the compensatory ANRG required for SS17 will be provided in advance of construction commencing, including a woodland walk. Whitsbury Green ANRG is also complete, as mentioned, and available for use by local residents. Temporary access to these facilities adjacent to the temporary access road will be provided in accordance with Penny Farthing's commitment to ensure continued public access. This will be available until the permanent footpaths have been completed and the area reinstated in line with the outline planning permission. The officer's report provides a detailed and comprehensive assessment of the proposal, confirming that there are no technical objections or indeed policy objections, and we welcome that. If members have any questions, we would be pleased to assist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So over to members. Questions, please. Councillor Woods.
In the notes, the town council comments about the problems of access to the ANRG. I think you've covered that to a certain extent. But can you tell me a little more about this Woodland Walk and where that starts and where that finishes, and how the residents of Augustus Park will have access to that?
So there will be a temporary footpath constructed along the southern edge, the northern edge of the application site. Stephen, would you mind indicating that on that plan? No, go south. South again, yep. So along the northern edge, yep, exactly there. So there'll be a temporary footpath put in place, which will connect into the existing network of footpaths and boardwalks through the Ford 1 ANRG. And then there will be a new footpath, which will go through what we're calling the Woodland Walk, which Stephen's indicating on the plan now. That is currently subject to a discharge of condition submission that's currently being assessed by the planning officer, which will facilitate a longer circular route through the compensatory ANRG that Penny Farthing have committed to provide before the construction of the temporary access starts.
Can I ask at what stage will that Woodland Walk be put in? Before the start of the access road?
Before the start construction on the temporary access. And it will be completed beforehand. So local residents will have access to all of that alternative natural recreational green space ahead of the start of construction on SS17.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? In that case, we'll go into debate. Does anybody have anything to say? Sorry, can you just turn off? Thank you. Councillor Brand?
I just wanted to check whether that was conditioned, that all had to be put in place before any development starts.
What's conditioned is that the Woodland Walk is subject to the outline planning permission. So it's not part of this application. So it's subject to the outline planning permission, and the outline planning permission was submitted by Penny Farthing Homes. At this present moment in time, Penny Farthing Homes are intending to go ahead with that, but technically and legally, it's a separate application. That land could change hands in terms of its ownership. It could be developed by another developer. So the difficulty then is a legal one, and a difficulty in terms of whether the test of reasonableness, which is required for all conditions, has been met. And in our view as officers, because it relates to a separate application, it was not reasonable to impose a requirement that the developers, before they do any work on the temporary construction road, put the Woodland Walk in. The Woodland Walk will be installed, the applicants have said, as an early part of their programme, but we're not in a position to condition that. And so that is part of the reason why we've given a short period for implementation, because you remember I spoke to members about the capacity that currently exists in terms of recreational land. So in overall recreational land terms, all of this recreational land, part of the Tinkers Cross development, is available for use. That site is well under ownership, well under capacity in terms of the current owners, the current occupiers. There are 14 occupiers, out of about 40 units that have been completed. So there is significant capacity there. So that weighs in its favour. We've given the permission a very short period for implementation of 12 months. So they have a very short window in which to implement the planning permission, partly because of that. And that will be a spur to the developers actually getting on with the Woodland Walk as well. The Woodland Walk is subject to condition 8 on the outline planning permission. That is subject to an application that's been made to discharge that condition, which we are currently dealing with. We've agreed the actual, pretty much the details in terms of the route of that walk. So that's been agreed by officers. And it is subject to a great crested new licence that needs to be put in place as well before that work happens. So essentially the programme that's been proposed by the applicant is this section of the Woodland Walk from Tinkers Cross is put in by March, and then from March onwards the rest of the Woodland Walk is put in, and then the temporary construction access will not start until May next year. So that's their programme. But as I said, because the Woodland Walk is subject to a separate application, then we're not able to condition this. But there is a fail-safe here that before they do any works at all on the roundabout or the permanent road or bridge or any of that road that leads to the residential zone, before they do any of that, they have to put the Woodland Walk in as part of that condition 8.
Does that mean, though, that there is a risk that the land could get sold or something happens and we have a temporary bridge in place and then no access for people?
Yeah, it is a risk, but the temporary bridge, the applicants have already confirmed they don't intend to use that for construction of the residential dwellings on the first phase. They haven't got planning permission for those residential dwellings on the first phase yet in detailed form. So the temporary bridge will only be used for construction purposes, and it will be, as I said, to ease the logistics of actually getting on and constructing the permanent bridge. The permanent bridge and the permanent roadworks can't be constructed until the Woodland Walk is in place. So it's a small risk.
Are there any more questions? In that case, I'll come back to the speaker. You have a minute to respond. Thank you.
I've got nothing further to say.
In that case, we'll go to the vote. The vote. Oh, sorry, I need a proposer. Jumping ahead of my time, so
Chairman, I'm happy to propose the recommendation.
the seconder. Brain's gone. Sorry. Thank you. So now we can go to the vote. And the recommendation is to grant subject to conditions. All of those in favour, please raise your hands. And against? Abstain? Okay, that has been granted. Thank you. We'll now continue with the next application, which you'll find on page 25 of the agenda. This is 24/10746 Barclays Bank, High Street, Ringwood. We do have speakers from the council. Before we go to them, we'll go ahead with the presentation, if you're ready. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the application before you today relates to the change of use and some physical alterations in relation to a property at 628 High Street, which is in the Ringwood sort of main retail frontage. We'll just have a look there. You can see we're well positioned in the centre of Ringwood. I will just ask you, while we're looking at this shot, to just, this is our application site here. Just give a little bit of consideration to the layout and keep that in mind later when we're talking about the sort of views into the street. One of the sort of views into the street here is the raised concerns about by the conservation officer, which we'll talk about in a moment. The area itself is a conservation area. There are a number of listed buildings. The property itself is not a listed building, but there are listed buildings in proximity to the site, including one of the adjacent properties, just to give it some context. In terms of the actual development being proposed, there aren't any substantial alterations to the main retail frontage of the building. As noted in the report, there is a separate advertisement application which is being considered separately to this proposal. In terms of the alterations to the frontage, there is a proposed new roof light window being installed on the front elevation, which is in the top right there. That's the window there. You can see it's partially obscured by a parapet wall feature, which we'll have a look at when we're looking at the site photographs in more detail. There is also some alterations to the rear, which includes additional fenestration details above a existing flat roof section. As you can see there, this backs onto a sort of car parking area to the rear, a service yard area. Just to give you a bit more detail about the internal layout. The internal alterations themselves don't require consent, but there are a number of alterations being undertaken to facilitate the change of use. The change of use being proposed is from a bank, which currently the premises is vacant, but was most recently in use as a bank. The new proposed use is as a educational facility intended to, the intended occupier is to act as a language school. So just to outline some of the key considerations, you can see there, these are the other remaining physical alterations, a couple of roof lights in the rear in the flat roof section and one in the rear of the building there. I'll just leave us on that image, which is the frontage of the building, while I'll talk a bit about the key issues associated with the application. So there are sort of two factors. We've got the physical alterations. No objection has been raised in terms of the alterations to the rear, which we'll just briefly have a look at. That's the service yard area to the rear. However, a number of concerns have been raised about the physical alterations in terms of this roof light window to the front, which would be up in this part of the building, by the council's conservation officer, primarily due to the potential for sight of the window down that road there, which is the road I was talking about earlier. The consideration as laid out in the report is that the parapet wall feature would predominantly screen the visual impact of that window, which would be viewed in the context of the existing dormer windows on that property. And while it's accepted that a roof light window would be a more unusual feature on a front elevation in this case, the physical alterations are considered to be, as I said, predominantly screened, so we didn't think that relationship was harmful in the context of the conservation area or the adjacent listed buildings. In terms of the use itself, concern has been raised by the parish in particular in relation to the loss of the bank use in the high street frontage. We've explored these details in the report in a lot more detail, but in summary, the proposed educational facility use was considered to provide a valuable use within the context of the surrounding high street. The shop frontage itself was being maintained. Just to give you some idea of what the internal layout proposed there is, there's a reception area to the front here and a classroom area here, which, while not obviously ideal in terms of the full active street frontage, would still be similar in terms of the sort of bank relationship or another office style use which might be appropriate in this location. In addition to that, we felt that the proposed training centre use would encourage people to visit the high street, attract residents to the the high street frontage, which is all a positive aspect to the development. So balancing all of those issues together, we felt that the proposed use was acceptable in that context, subject to the conditions to control as laid out in the report. I should clarify that as of yesterday, we did receive a set of amended plans from the applicant. In doing that, they proposed to, they no longer were proposing these roof light windows to the rear, but they also provided some additional details on the roof light window to the front and the balustrading to the rear, which there is a condition proposed in the report to secure those details. Given the time frame that we had before committee, we didn't think it was reasonable to consider those plans as part of the proposal, because obviously residents and the parish had not had an opportunity to consider those plans. However, so the recommendation for you is as stands. However, if the committee was minded to delegate authority back to us to assess those details, we could do that if you were minded to do so. So I've laid out the key considerations as laid out in the report. Just to summarise again, on balance, given the various issues with the use, we thought that was a positive aspect within the town centre, which brings an existing building back into use. And the physical features we felt did not represent a harmful impact to the conservation area and would maintain and preserve the existing appearance of the building within that context. So we recommended approval for the application. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now come to the speakers. So, Mr. Mark Bloodworth, you have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Councillors and planning officers, thank you for your time in letting me speak on behalf of UKG regarding the change of use of Barclays Bank 6 to 8 the High Street, Ringwood. We thank the case officer for his help and guidance throughout the process and his recommendations to grant subject to conditions of change of use. Condition drawings have been submitted and we will continue to work with the case officer and planning officials to ensure the exterior alterations are in keeping with the historical context of the building. And we agree that no exterior alterations will be undertaken without official agreement and sign-off. As highlighted by the case officer, the application received 1 objection and 9 support comments in the public consultation phase and the initial refusal from Ringwood Town Council. We hope that our agreement to work closely with the planning authorities remove all external renovation issues. This, we hope, leaves only the change of use from financial to educational. UKG is a family-run company with deep roots in the local community and the New Forest. All employees having been born here, educated in local schools, colleges and universities. Our sole intention is to bring increased wealth and further global awareness of all the New Forest has to offer. Over the 12 years, UKG has been bringing groups of international students to the forest and teaching in hired rooms in schools. We are now looking for a place to call home. We want Ringwood to be that home. All UKG groups that have attended our programmes in the past have stayed in local hotels or host families and spent money in shops surrounding tourist attractions. All have left memories of the New Forest and its surrounding area that will last a lifetime, and many have returned year after year, and we want this to continue. Our international learners will need accommodation in the local area. This will be in either host families or hotel accommodation, all of which will bring much needed income and additional income to local families. UKG submit that the additional students staying and studying in Ringwood will bring much needed additional footfall to local shops and businesses. Over the summer period, it's hoped that our programmes will attract 45 new students a week, all of whom will visit local shops and spend money. It is our intention, if permission is granted, to approach local businesses to create a local store discount card for our students to encourage spending in Ringwood shops and eateries. We hope that the committee can see from the public comment and social media feedback submitted to the council there is genuine support for the change of use for Barclays Bank. UKG has independently approached several of the independent retailers around the site to share our plans. All have expressed their approval and would welcome additional footfall in the High Street. In summary, we will be
Mr.
working...
Bloodford, you have had over 3 minutes. Are
Sorry.
you coming to your end?
I'm just saying, in summary, we'd just like to thank you for your time, and we hope we will bring value to the community.
Thank you very much. I now go to Councillor Mary DeBuse. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Ringwood Town Council recognises the value of occupying empty premises, and we accept that a language school in the town would bring employment and an additional community use. However, the proposed location is in the essential core of the primary shopping area, as designated in the Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan. It is also within the conservation area. I should say at this point, I will be happy to take any questions, especially given my role in the development of the Neighbourhood Plan. We have 2 objections. Firstly, as pointed out by the officer and the NFDC Conservation Officer, the proposed roof light on the front elevation will appear incongruous and will distract from the positive contribution the building makes to the conservation area. There are no other roof lights on that section of the High Street. The roof light may not be visible from the street, directly in front of the building, but it will be from viewpoints further away. The Conservation Officer states that in its current form, the application should be refused. We fail to understand why the Planning Officer has decided to overrule this specialist advice. Secondly, we object to the change of use of the ground floor for 2 reasons. We note there has been no evidence submitted as to the marketing that's been done to enable the premises to remain in their current use. And the RMP policy R2 states the conditions under which a change of use that results in a loss of active retail, commercial business or service would be supported. There are 4 criteria, and these must all be met as part of the policy. The use, as pointed out by the officer, is not a main town centre use, and hence it does not meet all the criteria. Therefore, it is contrary to policy R2 clause C. Critically, policy R2 is designed to promote active use of the ground floors. The spirit of active use is that it encourages a steady flow of people throughout the day. We do not believe that a language school would achieve this. Rather, we believe it would be the same set of 30 or 45 people using the facility over a period of weeks or months. For clarity, we only object to the change of use of the ground floor. So in summary, based on the impact on the conservation area of the roof light, and the change of use of the ground floor being contrary to RMP policy R2, we would ask that the committee refuse this application as it stands.
Thank you very much. We now come to questions. Members, please, questions. Councillor Dowd.
Thank you. My first point really is about the roof light. Given that the building is, let's say, unique in the high street, different from the other buildings, it already has 2 roof windows. What is it about the proposed 3rd window that differs from those existing windows, which would make it unacceptable?
So I think the difference being identified here is that, as you can see in these site photos, there are a number of dormer windows on the frontages of the properties, whereas the window being proposed is a roof light window. I should say, obviously, the Conservation Officer has said that it's unacceptable. As laid out in the report, my assessment is I think the visual impact of the window wouldn't be substantive enough that we could establish that there was harm to the conservation area. So I have disagreed with our conservation in that regard. So I can't necessarily justify that. But in terms of the key difference here that's being identified is the transition between dormer windows on these frontages. Obviously, in my report, what I've laid out is I do agree that some of the other roof forms in the street scene are much more visually prominent. This building is obviously different from its neighbouring contemporaries in that it has that parapet wall feature, which, as laid out in the report, I think is going to...
Yeah, I understand that. I'm concerned about... Is it that the materials being used differ markedly from the existing roof windows? Is it that the that it jars with the presentation of those windows. I'm struggling, given that it's already got windows, and I am sympathetic to conservation areas, so I understand the concern, but I'm not really clear about how it differs in form from the existing windows, so much so that it's causing this upset.
So if it was just a case of materials, obviously we could condition those materials, which is what the report has recommended. It's a condition to secure those details, and the applicant has, as I mentioned earlier, provided some additional detailing which was not available until yesterday, so unfortunately that's not being considered at the moment. But in terms of I think the comments of the conservation officer was just an in-principle objection to a dormer window, a roof light window specifically, as opposed to a dormer window style window, which they think is it is visually different in terms of how it fits into the roof form.
Right, so there could be a condition put in to make sure that that window fits with the existing windows.
So condition 3, which we've recommended, seeks to secure details of the exact installation, fitting and materials of the roof light windows to make sure that they are sympathetic in terms of the appearance with the conservation area. As I mentioned, the applicant has provided some additional details on that front. So if you are minded to do so, we could amend the recommendation to delegate authority to us to agree those details, or alternatively we could retain the condition as is, and they would have to discharge that condition.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Councillor Brand.
I just wanted to understand how long the bank had been empty.
I don't have an exact date for you. It's been a couple of months now, but I don't have the exact number off my head, unfortunately. It's been
18 years. And I also wanted to understand from the council's point of view, if it was a shop, what do you feel that having it as a shop will bring more footfall than you already get? What is I don't fully understand, being a shop owner myself, the benefit of it being a shop or not a shop in a high street of other shops, if that makes sense.
So the principle of the active use in the neighbourhood plan is that the more active frontage you have within a town, i.e. you don't go past shops that you would not go into. So every shop has an active frontage, therefore the whole town becomes more attractive. As soon as you don't have an active frontage, i.e. this is not somewhere you would just pop into, then you are going past a gap within the high street. So it is partly footfall, but it's partly the fact that the more things you have that are active, the more people find interest in the high street.
Councillor Woods.
I'm concerned that we see again that the views of the Ringwood Town Council and the neighbourhood plan are being circumvented. And I wonder if there any way that we can relook at the conditions that they would like to see and put those into the conditions of the actual application.
I'm not sure I would agree that the Ringwood Town Council is being circumvented. The neighbourhood plan and the policies that have been considered in substantial detail in the report. For the reasons laid out, we feel that the proposal does comply with those criteria in terms of providing a similar, form of development in terms of, while I accept that the pattern of use will be different, there will still be comings and goings from this property. They're maintaining the active street frontage. When the property was in use as a bank itself, some of those windows were closed off to be used as sort of ATM and the like, and were not being actively used as part of that frontage, whereas now they are being maintained as windows. Now, obviously, we have limited control over sort of some of those features, but for the reasons laid out in the report, we think the proposed use does contribute to that. Obviously, if you are concerned that that isn't the case, then that's why the application has been referred to committee today for you to sort of investigate that assessment in more detail if you wish to do so.
Councillor Richards, did you have your hand up?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just ask, have the businesses in the area been spoken to about their opinions? Because obviously we've seen the social media and the public want it, but have the businesses been spoken to about what they believe the impact would be on them at all?
We have spoken to the local businesses around the bank site and all have shared support for it in terms of getting our students into their shops, spending money in their eateries and other shopping areas.
Thank you. Councillor Richards.
Could I get a response from the council? Sorry, I feel that that would be one-sided if I only get it from one side.
So it wouldn't be a surprise that the other businesses would view having 45 people attending a language school as being additional trade for them. The point is not whether it benefits the immediate businesses, it's the impact it has on the totality of the primary shopping area. So a business is going to apply because they think it's good for them. Our role is to look at what's good for the whole of that high street and the whole of the primary shopping area. If the applicant was selling books, if they were running language classes that were just an hour long on that ground floor, and hence there was a lot more active coming in and out, that would be an entirely different matter.
Councillor Richards.
I just wondered how many empty shops there are in Ringwood and how realistic do you think it would be that this building could be used as a shop?
There are currently 3 empty shops, one of which is having to go undergo extensive refurbishment, so that's been shut for some time because it was virtually derelict. Most of the others typically are reoccupied within a 12-month period. What we don't know, these premises have been empty for more than 12 months, but we don't know for how long the offer of this applicant has been on those premises, and therefore they haven't actively been marketed to anybody else.
Councillor Wood.
Can I ask the councillor, what would it need for the applicant to do? Other things for you to go halfway and agree to the application?
So a question was asked previously about the roof light. It would need to be a dormer, not a roof light, so it's in keeping with the rest of the windows in that area. Nowhere else on the high street is there a Velux roof light to answer the question about the difference in windows. So if it was a dormer window, if it's required for light, then I think both the Conservation Officer and ourselves would agree. As I said, on the ground floor, if it was a more active part of what they do, with more footfall going through more regularly and closer to retail, then that may be acceptable, but that may not be something that this particular applicant could offer, in which case we would prefer that the applicant occupied the other floors of the building and indeed even the back of the ground floor, but left the opportunity for resale in the front of the ground floor.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? In that case, we're going to debate.
Thank you very much. I think these things are a question about balance. I am quite refreshed by this application, and we've watched every other bank close in all our high streets. And what are they in Leamington, for instance? Everyone's a coffee shop. And it's just too much of the same thing. And I think long term, that's not a good thing because they don't all survive. So I think that the visual impact of the roof light from the street scene is not an issue that concerns me. I think this could be revitalising this area and be good for local businesses and good for the type of people that it's introducing into the town. Sadly, older people using banks doesn't anymore, and the banks are changing that for us anyway. So I will be supporting the application.
Councillor Dow.
Thank you. Yes, there are lots of issues on this one to balance. As a former Hastings resident, I'm aware very much of the impact of language schools on the viability of a community, bringing trade to the area. Admittedly, that was before Brexit. So, yeah, I do think having a language school can be a positive thing for the wider community. There are obviously concerns because I think it is important when a local plan has all the time and effort that goes into producing a local plan that we should be mindful of that. But this is a business that is bringing trade into the town, so I think on balance, I feel that we should support this application, subject to delegating authority with very strict requirements for the outward appearance of the building to be in keeping. I think that's an absolute must. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Councillor Woods.
Is it possible to put those conditions to be on the application or not?
Chairman, if I can try and help and assist on this one. You'll look at the conditions on page 31 of your agenda. The second, bottom one, condition 3, is the one that sets out, and your case officer has already taken you to it, the fact that we would look to secure details of the balustrade at the rear and the details of the roof light windows. It's quite specific. It's the roof light windows. It's not a dormer window. That's not before you. What's before you is roof lights. And that's the detail we would look to secure by condition. The additional late receipt of amended plans that we've declined for the moment that the case officer has taken you from was trying to give us the details of those windows. So the details we took receipt of were still for roof lights. They weren't for dormer windows. Dormer windows are not part of the scheme. They're not before you. So I don't think we can delegate necessarily to take receipt of amended plans that will bring in a dormer window, because that will change what the application is proposing. That would require another round of consultation, another round of engagement with people, which we could do, but it fundamentally changes what the application is for. You will have read through your report, and you'll be mindful on page 29 that the test for development in the conservation area, the statutory test, is one of preservation of character. So you need to come to a view as to whether that roof light preserves the character and appearance of the conservation area. It's preservation or enhancement, but preservation is your test. Your case officer has come to the view, given the parapet, given the existing dormers, the relatively low level nature of the siting of the roof light, it would preserve the character of the conservation area. That's why the recommendation is what the recommendation is. But the amended plans were for the details of roof lights, not dormer windows.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I agree with previous comments about language school potentially being a good thing for the town centre, bringing trade. And also, you know, a bank doesn't, when a town centre is full of banks, it's not of much use to shoppers anyway, because you only ever go to one bank, don't you? And times are changing and we don't need all these banks. So in fact, I think, you know, this use could be better than use as a bank. So in that sense, it could be a good thing. Also, the type of people who are going to come to this, they're going to be, I would imagine, needing to use public transport. They're not going to have their own transport. So, you know, in the centre of Ringwood with good transport links, I would have thought it's, in that sense, an ideal location for it. So, yes, I would support this application.
Thank you. I think we've had enough comments. We've covered everything. I think we need a proposer now. So can I have a proposer for the recommendation, which is to grant subject to any conditions? Councillor Riley, thank you. And can I have a seconder? Councillor Richards. So the recommendation is to grant, subject to conditions, proposed by Councillor Riley, seconded by Councillor Richards. All of those in favour, please raise your hands. Gosh, my brain's not working today. 1 minute.
So, firstly, we do not agree with the case officer that this preserves conservation area. We do believe that the roof light should either not be there or be a dormer. Members may disagree, but they're disagreeing with both the town council and the conservation officer if they do that. Secondly, this is just another complete disregard for the years of effort and democratic mandate of the Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan. So if you are minded to approve, please note that's what you're doing.
Thank you. 1 minute.
I would just like to say we will work with the town councils and the planning office to ensure the integrity of that building and its historic context. We have no desire to challenge that, and we want to maintain Ringwood's High Street facade to its former glory.
Thank you. For myself, I mean, I use Ringwood a lot because it has such a large selection of retail shops. It's one of the best retail shopping areas there are. And I don't think this will distract from it. So we will now go to the vote. Do you want me to go through the proposed again by Councillor Riley, seconded by Councillor Richards? All of those in favour, please vote. Thank you.
5.
Against? And abstain. So that's carried. That's been carried. Okay. Okay, members, we will now continue. And our next application is on page 35 of the agenda. Application 24/10247, Doherty 51, Hampton Lane, Blackfield. And John, over to you again. We don't have any speakers on this one.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just as a quick update, since the report was written, I have had some additional comments submitted from Councillor Alan Alve, who just supports the comments of local residents in terms of concern about the highways impacts of the development, which we will talk about more in a second. So to go into the presentation, we are down in Blackfield. The application relates to the subdivision of an existing dwelling to form 2 separate units. Just to give you a bit of context for the site, that's the wider shot there. You can see there that the property is not directly on the street frontage and is served by a private access way, a private gravel access way there. Just to give a bit of context for the development, the property was originally a bungalow, which had, as you can see there, had a number of extensions to the rear. A planning application a number of years ago now granted consent for modifications to the property, still retaining it as a single dwelling, but allowing for additional accommodation in the roof form. So these are the plans that you're looking at there. The existing plans on the left and the proposed plans on the right are for that application back in 2021 for the alterations to the dwelling. When they were bringing forward that development, sorry, that's just to give you an idea of what the floor plan was. That's just the site plan on the left is the previously approved, and the site plan on the right is the current proposed site plan. Just to give a bit of context, when this consent was granted, there were conditions placed on these rear-facing windows to be obscurely glazed to prevent potential overlooking for the neighbouring property. We'll have a look at that in more detail when we go through the report, but the current recommendation doesn't include an additional restriction on the outlook from those windows. So just when we're looking at this plan here, just be mindful when we're looking at the site photos of the relationship with the neighbouring properties. So the current application proposes relatively minor physical alterations to the building. There are a couple of alterations to the exact positioning of some of the windows and the size of some of the windows, but the main alteration is internally to facilitate the conversion to 2 residential units. So you can see here the application primarily consists of a single 1-bed unit at ground floor level, and then another unit which covers both floors of the building that is slightly larger in scope. Previous applications on this site were refused for a similar form of development. At the time, this ground floor property had 2 bedrooms, which meant that this sort of kitchen living room area only had outlook to the side out of this window here, which is into there's a boundary treatment that runs along this boundary, so it wasn't considered that outlook was considered appropriate for a primary habitable accommodation. Where they've now lost a bedroom, it means that they've now got some retained outlook and light to the rear here to provide some additional outlook for this space. So on balance, we consider that relationship to be acceptable. Just in terms of the layout up here, you can see that this window in particular is the sole window for a proposed bedroom at first floor level. So that was the key area of concern in that the condition imposing restricting the outlook from these 2 windows, not necessarily as important on this window as this room retains alternate outlook, but on this window would be quite important as that would potentially restrict the available outlook for a bedroom. I'll go through the site photos now and we can have a look out of those windows in a second. So this is just to give you a bit of context for the sort of surrounding street scene. Here I'm standing on that gravel access path. You can see while there are a number of other low-lying bungalows in the area, we've also got sort of other similar properties, which is sort of what this property is now seeking to replicate. As you can see, the development has now been mostly implemented. As outlined in the report, the ground floor bedroom unit has now been occupied. I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a second. This is standing a bit further back. This is looking to the rear of the property. This is just internally in that living area space that was previously an area of concern about the available light and outlook in that space. You can see the outlook from that window into the neighbouring boundary treatment. But generally speaking, this is obviously without any lights on in the room. We felt that relationship was acceptable now with the additional light to the rear. This is the outlook from these windows. As you can see there, the outlook does provide some outlook into the rear, but given the sort of set forward of the windows and the relationship with the neighbouring properties, we felt that the angle of outlook from those windows was sufficiently oblique that we didn't think it was harmful in terms of the context of the relationship with the neighbouring properties, so we are not currently proposing to restrict the outlook from those windows, and that's the outlook to the rear. As laid out in the report, there are a couple of implications associated with the development. So we do not currently have a legal agreement, so we are looking to secure that as part of the development. So we are asking you to delegate authority to ourselves to secure the legal agreement to mitigate the wider impacts of the development. They have occupied one of the units. There obviously is a lawful use of the site as a single dwelling. So we are comfortable that we can secure by condition the nitrates impacts of the development before the occupation of the other units. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. Sorry, I just realised I skimmed over one of the key areas of concern by the parish was the lack of parking associated with the development. We have 2 proposed parking spaces, which is 1 per unit. Which does fall below the identified parking standards. As laid out in the officer's report, it was considered that while there is a shortfall below the identified parking standards, there is a low uptake of on-road parking in this area. We didn't feel that additional on-road parking pressure would be sufficient amenity harm to justify refusing the application solely on that basis. But I am happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Right, we don't have any speakers, so questions, please. Councillor Woods.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the parking provision, which seems quite inadequate. Is that lane, is the opposite the bungalow, is that a very wide area for extra cars to park?
Do you mean this verge or?
Yeah. Did your cars park on that verge or?
Not. Yeah, there is. Bus, yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. As you can see in this frontage, that there is a car could park on here, and there would be a passing width there. This is a private access way, so control in terms of the council control over parking on that area is limited. I will say there is potentially scope within the site to provide additional parking. So if you were concerned that there was insufficient parking in the development, we could secure a condition to require additional amended landscaping details of the parking arrangement. At the moment, the cars are coming in and parking sideways on. If they parked in vertically, there could be additional capacity potentially.
Can I ask if there's been many objections about the extra parking?
In terms of, obviously, we do have concerns raised by the parish about the parking issues, which is why the item has been referred to committee for determination.
Can I ask another question? Also, it mentions that the parish council mentions about the moisture in the bathroom and where it extracts from. Can you tell me anything about that?
I mean, that would generally speaking be a matter for building control to make sure that the development is built out in accordance with the sort of regulatory standards. It's not something that I don't think we could reasonably refuse that.
Would that affect the neighbours or anything?
I mean, I can't speak to whether a potential hypothetical future dam problem would affect
I just
the
couldn't
neighbour.
understand why it was in the notes, really. I just couldn't. Moisture in the bathroom, it's strange. And I've got one last question. On page 42 on other matters, you mentioned about the sill, saying it was exempt before, but it's not exempt now. Being new to the committee, can you explain that to me?
So when the original application for the extension was consented, there is a trigger in the SIL regulations about the amount of additional floor space that's being provided. In this case, the application was still liable, but was exempt on the basis that it was being used as a single dwelling. Obviously, now we've had the application come forwards and it's no longer being used as a single dwelling. I will be honest with you, I'm not a detailed expert on the SIL regulations myself, but my understanding is that our current approach is that as they have breached that restriction prior to the development being fully implemented, they've now found themselves in a situation where that exemption is going to be potentially withdrawn, so the new development will potentially trigger that SIL requirement, SIL liability. And one of the issues with SIL exemptions is that they can't be done retroactively. So it may well be now that the developer is going to be liable to make a contribution under the SIL regulations. I will say from our point of view, no special weight has been afforded to the SIL regulations in terms of how that's the determination of the application.
So that wouldn't affect how you
No.
Thank you. Councillor Dowd.
Thank you. I'm assuming that plan is relatively to scale, so there is no conceivable reason why the cars can't be turned 90 degrees and there be a third parking space included on the site, which I think would make it in keeping with required parking. Or would it need 4 spaces?
Depending on how the spaces are allocated, we have slightly different standards for communal parking arrangements and for individually allocated parking arrangements. So the individually allocated parking arrangements are laid out in the report, which would be a total of 4.5 spaces, so there would still be a shortfall. If there's a communal arrangement, it would be potentially down to, it would be slightly rounding up above 3, but
Because it's something like 1.4.
3.3 would be the communal parking arrangements. So there would still be a nominal shortfall, but it would be obviously lesser than if they were unallocated. Obviously, the reason they've done it the way they have is they are presumably seeking to retain that existing wall on the frontage. But as I said, if we are minded to do so, we could impose a condition to require an amended landscaping scheme.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Penny.
Thank you, Chair. Question for the officer. If it was to go forward and get approval, I'd like to see restrictions on parking, especially for commercial vehicles. Because we don't know that the residents moving in are not going to have the big white van. That is going to really cause a problem. Thank you.
So generally speaking, if there is a commercial aspect of a use, if it's ancillary to the use, that wouldn't require planning permission in and of itself. So, for example, if you have a plumber who works from home and has a van, they're perfectly entitled to park their van on their property if they want to do so. If there's a non-ancillary nature to the use, so for example, if someone's running a plumbing business at property and they're trying to park 10 vans on a property, that would require planning permission in its own right, potentially. So my concern would be that a condition to restrict commercial parking wouldn't necessarily meet those tests and criteria, in that they would potentially require permission in their own right if there was a non-ancillary commercial function associated with the property. But obviously the committee can consider that in their
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? In that case, we're going to debate. Is there anybody? Councillor.
Yeah, it's just a comment, really. I can't believe that we approved that in the first place, because it just doesn't look right in that scene at all. It's huge. And they've obviously broken every rule that we gave them and done whatever they wanted. So I'm slightly concerned that they just carry on doing that. Yeah.
Councillor Dowd.
Yes, it does. I mean, I don't know the circumstances, but it does strike me as an example of creep, where a property is enlarged over time with the intention of making it two properties, which obviously, in terms of overdevelopment, is done by stealth in that case. So I can understand the parish council's concern over this. Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Riley.
I believe that this is overdevelopment here, and I'm not happy with the overdevelopment of this site. And the other thing is, I'm not happy with the parking arrangements either, so that I will not support this on the grounds of overdevelopment. Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything to say? In that case, we'll go back to the recommendation, which is for the service manager to grant. Do I have any proposers for that? Councillor Rickman, and a seconder? Councillor Richards. In that case, we'll go to the vote. So it's been proposed by Councillor Rickman that we accept the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Richards. All of those in favour, please raise your hand.
It's already built, isn't it? We can't not have it built. We can't stop it being built. It's there, but you want to make the best situation of a bad block, really.
Do you need any more clarification to want to go back to the vote? Do you need any more clarification on this? Councillor Rickman.
Right, why I proposed what I did was because we are where we are. It exists. I could argue slightly that 2 smaller units of accommodation in the New Forest is a good thing. And maybe those won't need a car. They may not even have a car. So, like I said earlier, it's a question of balance, but it exists. We're not going to change anything. That's why I, on balance, felt that the officer's recommendation was probably the right one.
Councillor Dowd.
Yes, but unfortunately, the situation is that a lot of places are blighted by car parking in inopportune places. And as councillors, we get our in trays full of people who are at their wits' end with inconsiderate parking. So I think we do have to be mindful that it is not adequate in terms of the parking arrangements, and it will have an impact on the neighbours and the wider community. Thank you.
I mean, it is quite a large space. I'm sure you can get 3 cars in there quite easily. Councillor Rickman.
Just to help with that, could I ask officers if that will be a valid reason for refusal? Just that on its own.
Chairman, if I can help then. Looking back through your report, page 40, and your case officer's taking you to it right in the middle, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th paragraph down, your case officer set out what the parking requirements are. They've then gone on to talk about the fact that there is a shortfall, but there's capacity within the surrounding areas. You have a standard. The standard would be 4.5 spaces. If it's unallocated, go down to 3.3 spaces. So there's still a shortfall by 1.3 space, even against your unallocated standard. If you could find a policy hook and demonstrate some harm for me, you could run a reason for refusal on inadequate parking provision. But I would say your case officer set out the case there that there's capacity on the surrounding roads in a relatively quiet part of Blackfield, away from the village centre. You have a service road, and when you look at the aerial photograph, it looks like the site to the immediate north has got a vehicle parked on that service road, and it's still wide enough for another vehicle to pass. And you've had some narrative from your case officer about his assessment when he was on site.
You mentioned there about three, but the current plan that we're looking at only has position for 2. So if we wanted it to be 3, they'd have to come back with a new plan, wouldn't they? With knocking that wall down and new landscaping and everything. So that's what I think they need to be doing.
One of the points that I think your case officer made to you was if we were to take receipt of an amended plan that showed some different landscaping arrangements on site or a different parking arrangement on site, you could get close to the unallocated parking. You could potentially get an extra space on the frontage of that property. The motion on the recommendations failed, so I think you need to come up with an alternative recommendation. Whether that's defer to take receipt of an amended plan is one thing. You could suggest, and I think maybe your vice chairman was looking at, or somebody across the floor, apologies if I get the member wrong, was looking at whether there's a way to adjust the conditions, notwithstanding the submitted site plan, for example, within a certain time frame, take receipt of plan showing 3 parking spaces at the front of the dwelling and then be implemented prior to the second occupation, given that we've already got 1 occupation on the site, might be a way to deal with it.
What we do, because I think they do whatever they want. So
I don't think there's any merit in deferring this. I think we need to come to a decision. Councillor.
So can I be clear about this then, that we can in this case ask for an amended plan to satisfy that arrangement, even though we couldn't make changes to a previous plan?
My advice previously was you were fundamentally changing from a dormer to a roof light. My suggestion here is we're looking at securing some of the landscaping and the appearance at the front of the site by planning condition. We could look to deal with that and secure an amended
So
layout.
that would be acceptable.
I think you could do it as a notwithstanding the submitted site plan. Details of the parking could be provided by planning condition. I think you'd have to come back with an alternative recommendation. The first recommendation has failed. So you need to come up with an alternative proposal, and that could be going back to recommending permission, but with subject to the additional condition that we're now discussing. You're discussing that's a motion I think that could work.
Yeah.
Just further to that, Chair, following the advice from Mark, you at the moment you've refused the proposal that was before you, which is to grant subject to these existing conditions in the report. You now have the option of either moving to defer, moving to refuse, or moving to grant subject to some other conditions that you would find acceptable to mitigate some of the harm around the parking, for example. So if you wanted to come forward with a move to grant subject to an additional condition, you would be able to do that.
I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, I think we would be satisfied if subject to conditions around adequate parking in line with expectations.
So we'll come back then. The recommendation which was to grant, and now come back to the recommendation which was to grant with the added conditions, if you'd just like to talk us through those.
Additional condition, I would suggest, Chairman, and maybe that that we look to delegate back to officers to refine the final wording rather than articulate it exactly in the meeting now, but it would be delegate back to me for permission subject to an additional condition to ensure a plan is provided detailing 3 parking spaces on the frontage, and that to be provided and delivered prior to the second occupation.
Thank you. Sorry.
Even a minimum of 3.
Minimum 3, we can say, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Rick.
Yeah, I think that's far better compromise than using the word adequate. What is adequate to one person won't be to other. That is unfair on an officer to expect them to protect that. But the bit of discussion that's gone on since makes a lot of sense to me, to saying 3 as an actual number. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go back to the vote then, which... Yeah. Do we still have the same proposer and the same... Councillor Brand, are you... You're proposing. And seconding? Councillor Woods. So now we'll go to the vote, which is proposed by Councillor Brand and seconded by Councillor Woods. All of those in favour, please raise your hands.
6, 7.
And against? 1. Okay, thank you. Got there in the end. Thank you very much. It is on page 53 of your agenda, 24/10510, 50 Beckton Lane, Barton-on-Sea, New Milton. We do have speakers on this, but we'll go straight into the presentation. If you'd like to begin, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. As a verbal update, the description of development still contains the reference to the fencing, but this was removed from the plans dated 2nd of October. The word fencing will be removed from the decision notice following the committee. The application is at 50 Beckton Lane. It's a residential property adjacent to the Delston Court School. And the application is for a new access and driveway. This is the red line plan. This is the local context, and the site is in New Milton. This is the aerial photograph, and this is the block plan showing the proposed access and driveway off Beckton Lane. This is the existing site plan, and the trees to the eastern boundary are a group tree preservation order. This is covered in the report. This is the proposed site plan showing the proposed dropped access with a concrete slab. It has a gravel and geocell construction and an existing closed boarded fence which runs along the eastern boundary. There is additional railings on the east of the closed boarded fence too. These photographs are taken, this one's along the eastern boundary of the site, looking along Beckton Lane to the north, and this photograph is taken from the south of the site, looking towards the residential property. These photographs are taken from the eastern boundary, looking towards the close bordered fence, which is sited behind the railings, and there is a ditch here. This is the tree plan, so the council's tree officer is satisfied that the proposal can be provided without resulting in detrimental impacts upon the trees, which are important to the visual amenities of the area. And these are the visibility displays and sight lines. The Highways Authority will also consult on the proposal and raise no objection, so they are satisfied that the proposal can be provided without resulting in adverse impacts upon highway safety. And the recommendation is to grant subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have two speakers, Mr. Darrell Howells and Councillor Robert Maynard. You have 3 minutes each. So, Mr. Howells, if you'd like to start, thank you.
Good morning, members. My name is Darrell Howells, and I'm a chartered town planner managing my own planning consultancy. I come before you today to support my client's application for the proposed access and the creation of the driveway. I am pleased that your planning officer has carried out a detailed consideration of the proposal and determined that it should be recommended for approval as being compliant with your adopted planning policies. The planning history recalls a similar application was refused earlier this year solely on the grounds of the impact or concerns of the impact of the development to nearby oak and pine trees. This revised planning application includes all the necessary arboricultural information to demonstrate that no harm will occur during the development phase or the use of the driveway long term. And as you have heard, the tree officer supports this revised application. The previous application was deemed acceptable in terms of highway safety, and I am pleased to report that this revised scheme has received the same officer's recommendation. The creation of a driveway in this location accords with the general pattern of development in the street scene and will not look out of place in a potential residential suburb. The recommendation is to approve because your planning officer, highway officer, and more importantly, the tree officer all now support the application, subject to the conditions of which my client fully accepts. I would ask you to support this application, please.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robert Maynard, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Robert Maynard of the Barton and Beckton ward for New Milton Town Council, and I will be speaking against this proposal. The New Milton Town Council has 3 major objections to this planning application. When we reviewed the application in October, it was felt by most of the councillors that it was detrimental to the rural character of the area. The tall trees that make up the existing boundary are an important landmark on Beckton Lane, and certainly in keeping with the New Forest and the New Milton Neighbourhood Plan. These trees are mainly protected by tree preservation orders, as they provide a significant addition to the overall natural beauty of the area, and the New Milton Local Distinctiveness Study makes this point on page 59, which shows that strong landscape structure of tree lines, significant street trees and larger trees or groups. To cut one down, only to replace it with an ugly close-panelled fence, seems like an unnecessary act of vandalism. There is already access to the property via the Dilston Court driveway, a few metres away, and the additional parking required in this application could be achieved without damaging the Beckton Lane tree line. Our second objection related to the problems that opening a new entrance so close to the existing school driveway could cause. This seems like an unnecessary change which could cause confusion and increase congestion during the school pick-up and drop-off times. And our final objection relates purely to the overall cosmetic appearance of the fencing. We feel that the height and style of the proposed closed-panelled fence would be completely out of character for the neighbourhood and a suburbanisation which is incongruous to the rural character of this lane, and it should be reconsidered. So that's my finish. Thank you very much for your consideration, and I hope you'll take these points into consideration.
Thank you. Members, questions, please. Councillor Brand.
Could you show me on your pictures exactly where the driveway would be going in between there? And the fencing that it mentions, how much taller is the fencing going to be?
I believe the closed boarded fence is just to be retained. There was previously a proposed fence at the front of the property, but that's been removed from the plans, and that was 1.5 metres in height. Oh, sorry, the access would be, it's in here somewhere. There would be a small oak tree removed, but the tree officer is satisfied with that.
Councillor Wright.
How many trees are going to be removed by having this entrance here?
Just one small oak tree.
Just one?
Just one small oak tree, yeah, and the tree officer is satisfied with that.
Any more questions? We're going to debate then. Does anybody have anything to say? Councillor Dowd.
Yes, I'm happy to support the recommendation. Thank you. I will propose when we get to that stage, yes.
Thank you. And I will need a seconder. Councillor Penny. So nobody has anything to say, in which case I'll come back to the speakers. So you'll have 1 minute to respond. 1 minute? Nothing to say? Councillor, nothing to say. Okay, in that case, we'll go to the vote. So the recommendation is to grant, proposed by Councillor Dowd, seconded by Councillor Penny. All of those in favour, please raise your hands.
It's unanimous.
That's unanimous, that's being granted. Thank you very much. We come to the next application, which is on page 61 of your agenda. Application 10078, The Granary, 5 Harbridge Court, Sommerley. And we do have 2 speakers on this, and I believe Councillor Haywood, you're going to speak as well. Okay, so let's go to the presentation. Thank you, Kate. Thank you.
Good morning. Right, so this application, as you've already been advised, is for the granary at 4 Harbridge Court at Sommerley. The recommendation is to refuse. The reason it's come to committee is there's a contrary view with Ellingham, Harbridge and Ivesley Parish Council and Councillor Haywood. Right, so to start the presentation. So this application is one of 2 applications I'll be presenting to you today. This is the planning application. We do have a concurrent listed building application. So obviously there will be aspects of the development that I won't be covering under this application, like the internal alterations, because they'll only be covered by the listed building application. So this application is for the infilling of 2 existing open cart bays to create a ground floor living dining room with glazed infills to the front elevation and timber infill to the side to separate the converted space from the retained single open cart bay. Replacement of existing first floor single glazed timber windows with double glazed units like for like. New first floor timber window to south elevation. Roof lights and change of window to French door in the single storey side extension on the east elevation. A flue on the south elevation and renewing a brick infilled first floor opening to the west elevation. There was an update because there was a spelling error, sorry about that, where it was referred to as an unfilled first floor opening, which is obviously incorrect. So what we've got in front of you at the moment is the red line plan. So this shows the outline of the granary building, which which forms part of a complex of buildings which now form Harbridge Court. This building is not listed in its own right, but it is a curtilage listed building. And I'll come on to a bit more of that in a moment. So this is the context of the site. So again, you can see the red line showing it in context of the other buildings within Harbridge Court, which are here. And it's in a lovely secluded location with forest surrounding it. And then this is the aerial photograph. So you can see how the building currently sits to the front of the site. And then it's gated behind, and you've got the converted farmhouse and barn, which have been also converted into several properties. And this is the constraints sheet. This shows a bridleway and footpath as coloured here. So we've got a bridleway that runs past the building. And this also provides the vehicular access into the site as well, which goes past the granary and then into the back through a gate here. And then you've got like a parking court to the rear. Right, so just to give a bit of background to this application, I apologise for the poor quality of these plans. As you can see, these were the original ones from '89. So this complex of buildings was originally going to be turned into a hotel and golf course, and the granary was identified to be converted into offices. So the plans, as you can see, it was at that stage, you had the open cart bays at ground floor level, and then at first floor level, you had the grain bins, which divided, and there was an external access going up through it. Now, some of these works were undertaken, but I don't think it appears from the history that it wasn't completed. And by the time we get to 97, these buildings are in poor repair. Now, as I said, this building is curtilage listed. And I will probably be emphasising that quite a bit through this presentation. So it's not listed in its own right, but it is curtilage listed, so it is important. It is treated as a listed building. It forms part of this complex of buildings, which was a model farm, which seems to have been built in 1780, and by quite a notable architect, S. Samuel Wyatt. And this is, which elevates the significance of this group of buildings. And because he was sort of also doing model farms at that time. So this is an important example of a model farm, this group of buildings. So when it was put forward to be converted to residential with the other buildings at Harbridge Court, it was seen as the only viable way to save these buildings. They were falling into disrepair. So putting them into a residential use was seen as the viable option. However, at that time, great emphasis was put on the conversion of the granary building, with the cart bays being retained as open at ground floor level, as really being important for the significance of the agricultural significance of this group of buildings. So as you can see, it was converted, these plans, so you've got the floor plan. So we had a single story element to the side which was replaced. So that is a modern addition. And so you had a staircase installed. And then at first floor level, the grain bins were obviously had been removed by then. So we had a 2-bedroom conversion with a bathroom and a lounge dining room at first floor level. And there were some changes to the windows at this time as well. So these are modern windows. I've also put this plan in just to sort of just complete the planning history on this, because reference has been made to the flue. Obviously, this application does include the installation of a flue with serving a wood burner at ground floor. There was previously an approval for a flue actually on the front elevation, north elevation, whereas the current plans move it to the back. But this was seen as acceptable at that time, and taking that into account, I don't see why that would be an issue currently. You know, it was seen to preserve the building. You know, it would be serving its residential use. Right, so this is the block plan, as you can see. So that identifies the building in relation to the other properties at Harbridge Court. And the 2 is the sort of modern lean-to, and then this is 1 indicates the original building. So this is the existing and proposed north elevation. So as you can see, as I said, there are several elements to this application. The refusal just focuses on the enclosure of the cart bays. That is the fundamental objection to this proposal. Now, I do appreciate that, you know, with regards to the enclosure of the cart bays, they're going to be glazed. So, you know, there is an argument to be put that it would be retaining a sense of openness. However, it isn't. It is enclosing that when the emphasis has been that they should be retained as open. It has always been, you know, since its conversion in 2000, nothing's been suggested that this has failed as a residential property, so it has been able to function. Just doing an internet search, it seems to have exchanged hands a few times, but it seems a well-maintained building, as you'll see from the photographs. Coming back to the other aspects, the changes to the windows, these are to do really a like-for-like replacement on the whole, with timber windows, but they will be slimline double glazed. They're not historic windows. They aren't going to be physically changing in appearance, and Historic England do support now the introduction of slimline double glazing in certain cases where you haven't got the loss of historic windows. So that aspect isn't an issue. But something else I will just draw your attention to, with the glazing, when this application, we have had a number of amendments to it for various reasons during the course of the application being with us. The latest amendment has introduced a strip down this glazing panel here, which is further, it does reduce the element of glazing. The emphasis before the proposal was to have it fully glazed. That has been introduced because of ecology, which I will come on to shortly. So this is just the west elevation. This shows the area that's infilled, and they're just going to redo that with reclaimed bricks. So that's seen as a positive, so that's good. And then we've got the south and east elevations. Now, as I've already remarked, with the introduction of roof lights here and the change of the window to a French door, this isn't historic fabric that this will be interfering with. So that in itself isn't an issue. I've already remarked on the flue. We had accepted the principle of that before. The same with the windows. The main change is this window here, but as you can see, there is an opening there. There is the introduction of an additional window at ground floor level. Now that is going to be intervention into historic fabric, and is only required to facilitate the use of the ground floor area for living accommodation. So there is an objection to that because we have an objection to the enclosure of that space for living accommodation at ground floor, and obviously this is only required to facilitate that. This is just the existing and proposed site roof plan, so you can just see the roof lights and where the flue are going to be. Now this is the ground floor plan. Now obviously the internal alterations I'll be dealing with on the listed building application. So on this, it's really just to highlight the change of use of this area here, which will become a living area, and there's some alterations to the kitchen. just to sort of make that, just change the layout of it slightly by the looks of it. And again, this is the first floor, so I'll really be dealing with the internal alterations at part of the listed building application. This is a section that's been very helpfully provided. Now we're coming on to the photographs. So this is it from the front elevation. As you can see, it is a residential property. It was required to be residential to secure its long-term retention of the building and preserve it. But, you know, it is an agriculture, you know, it is significant for its agricultural contribution to this collection of buildings. I've put this photograph in. So we're going to be having an opening, but this will really be mainly to deal with the internal alterations, which I'll be dealing with listed building. But as you can see, we've got these battens here. Now, we have had further amended plans, which was really to do with the ecology. And there's going to be a full ceiling because this property is a bat roost, which again, I'll come on to in a minute. Here's some more photographs so you can see how it sits in the area. And this is the public footpath that runs, or bridleway, sorry, that runs along it. As you can see, I managed to park just outside the property without obstructing. And then you've got open forest to the other side. As I said, a beautiful location. Now, this last slide shows the bats. Now, ecology is not now a reason for refusal. It was originally, but amended plans have come in which have addressed that. Now, this building is a bat roost. I didn't appreciate fully the importance until it was pointed out to me, but on the peak count, there's been 3 surveys done. There were 720 bats counted emerging from this, which, as I said, I had to have explained to me that that is a very significant number, because significant in some places is like 20. So that, as you can see, they're emerging from across the building. And we've got mainly soprano pipistrelles, and we've got some a roost of brown long-eared bats as well. However, try to go back to that plan. There are some in the cart bay as well, which, as I pointed out to you, that additional glazing strip that was introduced, that timber panel, because to protect the emergence points of the bats. So when you look at if I just go back to the internal photograph, so emergence points are just in front of where the glazing would be. There is an emergence point there, and also to the other side. But with the measures that they've put in place, with the amendments, putting a false ceiling in, so they're not cutting into the ceiling, because as I understand it, there are bats in this ceiling, so they're not going to be disturbing that, and all the works will be done very methodically. So they've said they don't need a license from Natural England, because they're not disturbing or destroying a roost. And our ecologists have been satisfied following the amended plans. So even though we've managed to overcome the ecology issues, and there are aspects of the proposal which are acceptable, I cannot reach a split decision, and there is a fundamental objection to the enclosure of the cart bays, as it is considered that this will undermine the significance and the contribution this building makes. And it was always the ethos of this, right from when it was first converted, that those cart bays were significant in understanding this group of buildings. So it does lead to less than substantial harm. And then the question is, when less than substantial harm is identified, is there any public benefit? Public benefit is solely to do with the preservation of the building. This is a well-maintained building. There's nothing to suggest it's at threat. I know comments have been made about the contribution the family make to the wider residents, which is commendable. But when we're looking at public benefits, that isn't something that we would consider. So my recommendation is to refuse for the reason on the screen. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We'll come to the speakers now. We have Mr. Jason Rickwood and Mr. James Rogers. You have 3 minutes between you. You're splitting it, yeah? Okay. And then we'll have Councillor Hayward. You will have 3 minutes. So we'll come to you first. Is it Mr. Rickwood's going to do 2 minutes? Yeah? Okay.
Thank you very much. Good morning, councillors. My name's Jason Rickwood and I own 4 Harbridge Court with my partner, Fiz Swain. We've lived in this house for 3 years and we love it. Our application to make the proposed changes stems from a desire to allow this special building to reach its full modern day potential whilst retaining the incredible character that it possesses. Our plan was always considerate of the bays as a defining characteristic of the building. From the very start of our journey, we wanted to improve and accentuate this existing space whilst respecting the historical and aesthetic significance that the building possesses, whilst also in consideration of the bats that we have just discussed. Currently, the space below the house is a damp car park with exposed soil pipes, electric strip lighting and a stairway bulkhead. We hope to improve this space by removing these industrial additions from 25 years ago, when this property and those surrounding it were converted from a dilapidated farmyard into a number of residential homes. It is also worth noting that an existing portion of our kitchen and our whole garage were originally open cart bays and were sensitively infilled during the larger development, which proves that a sensitive infill proposal is suitable for this building. By utilising this space, with considered and attractive design features, we feel that we will be aligning the granary with the surrounding buildings, which are either newer builds, circa 2000, or have undergone significant improvement since their development a quarter of a century ago. Being able to have a doorway between the existing kitchen and the proposed glazed downstairs space significantly increases the interior square footage of the house, while still being within the footprint of the building, and will be a huge step toward making what is currently a good house a great home. In rebuttal to Ms Cattermole's suggestion that our plans would be contrary to policy DM1 of the local plan part 2, we would suggest that our specific building holds less significance to the whole than is suggested in her report. The granary is not listed in its own right, and as alluded to above, the neighbouring listed buildings have had significant internal and external development since their conversion, which is clearly visible from the track with modern day additions. We also refute that our proposal is contrary to policy ENV3 of the local plan part 1, as the stated policy encourages effective use of existing space, climate resilience and attractive sympathetic design. I'm now going to hand over to our neighbour, Jim. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good morning. My name's Jim Rogers and I'm a neighbour of Jason and Fiz, and I want to talk to you about why I fully support their planning application, as do my wife and others of our neighbours. Jason and Fiz have lived in the granary for 3 years and are very involved members of our community. They're young, ambitious, helpful and excited to improve the granary for their future, bringing new life to the building and our community as a whole. Previous owners had always rented out the property, resulting in little inward investment and no improvements to the granary for many years. No upgrades and maintenance work kept to a minimum. We feel that the plans Jason and Fiz propose will improve the building greatly and align it with the quality of their surrounding homes. Harbridge Court is a smaller hamlet of 9 properties and all now privately owned, where all the owners take great care to maintain their properties to a high standard, making it, for me, a charming community to be part of. We feel the proposed work is justified and will enhance the property, thus the lives of Jason and Fiz and ourselves. In closing, it will still be the granary, but a byproduct of its improvement will be the improved aesthetics of the approach to the communal driveway, which will be happy for all of us.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So I speak here as Ward Councillor for Ringwood North and Ellingham, but I'm also Chair of Ellingham, Harbridge and Ibsley Parish Council. I played no part in deliberations on this particular application there, but I was aware of, I was actually present, I was aware of some of the issues that were being discussed in the 3 times that this application came in front of that council. I also need to make a quick apology for my discourteousness for not pre-noting this committee of my attendance to speak here. I'm relatively new, I've learned something today. So you've heard a lot of information there from Mr. Rickwood. I have visited this site. For me, this application really turns on what we need to do to protect the heritage here. The key thing that struck me when I visited this site was, although we've got the 3 bays there, and on photos which show the bays as quite dark, you get a lot of, you can see the exterior of the building, but you do see darkness in there. Underneath the bays, it's actually quite functional, and Mr. Rickwood alluded to this. There's drains, there's bricks, there are garages in there. And I have seen the plans also, and I believe that the plans would move this property forward sympathetically, and also shield some of those more ugly elements. It would mean a change to the exterior fabric, but it would shield some of those more ugly elements of that. I'm also conscious of the environmental benefits of using existing properties, old properties in this case, for residential uses, and possibly increasing the number of people that use them. We all know that we have to deliver more housing in this area for more people. One way may be to combining this to protect existing properties is actually to turn them into a use that's in demand in these areas. So I'll put that before the committee. So I think overall the arguments for me personally are there for supporting this application. I'm aware that there is a lot of nervousness around listed building consent. I'm aware there's a lot of nervousness of protecting our heritage, but we've got to protect it in the future, and that's where I would come from on this particular application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, you now have your chance to ask questions. Councillor Dowd.
Thank you. I'd like to ask about the flu, because that was obviously decided in 2007, and things have moved on quite some way in terms of how we can heat our homes in a more sustainable way. I'm surprised that there weren't objections to changing the outward appearance of the building with a flue. Could you just outline why that's acceptable with our new planning regulations?
With regards to the flu, when I looked at that, I looked at the 2007 application, and the main reason that was considered acceptable was it was accepted there were other flues on other properties within that group of buildings. This flue will now be sited to the south elevation rather than on the north, so it's going to be in a more discreet location. And taking that into account, I didn't think there was a reason to justify a refusal on that aspect of the development. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Can I ask a second question? I'm hearing what you're saying about the importance of it as a model farm. I'm not aware of how many other examples of model farms there are in the vicinity to sort of work out its significance. And this, to my view, is a judgment call, whether or not we assess the benefit of the use of the building as a dwelling place against the historical importance of the building in its mostly unaltered state at that stage. So are you able to give it some kind of context for us to make this judgment?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not an expert on model farms. I did look into this, and obviously I looked at the heritage statement provided by the applicant's agent in support of the application, and that does make reference to the fact that it is an example of a model farm, and it also states that its significance is elevated because of the architect Samuel Wyatt, who was involved, who seemed to be there was a family of them. I think the father was an architect or builder, and his brother was also an architect. So I don't know how well Samuel Wyatt is known. I think his brother takes priority, but just to put it in a nutshell, Samuel Wyatt was involved with Summerley House, I believe, Shugborough Hall, and there possibly was a model farmhouse at Shugborough Hall, but I don't know. So that's as far as my knowledge goes, so I apologise.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? In that case, we'll go into debate. Councillor Dowd.
Thank you. It is always difficult because we are mindful of heritage, but I think we have to be practical as well. And where a building is clearly serving need as a dwelling place, we want to be sure that those are going to be good places to live and for the people living there to enjoy them with minimal impact on the exterior. Again, I have spent some time in a coach house where the archway was filled in, and I believe the integrity of the building was retained through suitable and sensitive additions there, making the use of the building much more flexible. And I think in this particular case, even though it is clearly you can see it publicly walking past, I think it's sensitive enough to retain the feel and the integrity of the original building. But I think it is a fine judgment. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to comment? Councillor Richards.
Designed by Samuel Wyatt, who's a hugely important figure in our history. And so it's not just any old listed building we're talking about. And as our officer says, there are no balancing public benefits to it, which would offset the harm, lessen substantial harm to the building. Another point, I just think, if you fill those in with glass panels, it's going to be a bit like living in a fishbowl. And I just wonder whether that will introduce a pressure in the future to enclose them, because it's not going to be so comfortable for the inhabitants, I would not have thought. So I would propose that we refuse this application in line with the officer's recommendation.
Anybody else have anything they wish to say? The recommendation is to refuse, and we've had a proposal, so I'll need a seconder for that. Councillor Woods. Right, before we go to the vote, we need to come back to the speaker. So you have a minute to respond. So you won't want to split a minute, I guess. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll keep it short and sweet. In regards to Samuel Wyatt and existing barn conversions, I've recently found a Norfolk-based barn farms to be converted like this. In regards to your concerns about the track use and people looking in through the windows, that track is used very minimally and by people that we know. We have no concerns about our privacy being infringed upon from people walking past. The heritage statement said that they feel that the impacts are acceptable and a light touch without harm. The coach house reference was appreciated. Thank you very much. We think that that falls in line with what we're pushing for. And the option potentially for the glass, if there is any concerns about privacy down the line, but which we're not expecting, would be potentially some sort of reflective or darkened glass if that is an issue in the future. That's all I'd say. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hayward, you have a minute.
Thank you.
In that case, we'll go to the vote. So the recommendation is to refuse. That's been proposed by Councillor Richards and seconded by Councillor Woods. All of those in favour for refusal, please raise your hands.
2, 3.
And those against?
4.
I've abstained. So that's been lost. So do I need to go to a vote for granting?
I need to do a resolution.
Mm.
To grant.
Yeah.
Mark would have to come in and provide some advice on the reason.
Chairman, thank you. Members, we're where we were on the previous item now, I think. So the recommendation before you has failed, and between you now need to come up with an alternative recommendation. That recommendation, one would assume, given that we were recommending refusal and that's failed, would be to recommend permission. A couple of things I think you need to think about and maybe have some further consideration in debate about before we get there is that if you're going to recommend permission is to be mindful of the tests in an MPPF, the statutory tests in the Act, and the tests in your development plan. And they are set out on page 68 of your agenda at the start of paragraph 10.2.4. You'll see there, sorry, no, wrong page. I'm going to take you to page 66, sorry, paragraph 10.2, the impact on listed buildings. Section 66, brackets 1 of the Act, policy DM1, and the case officer took you through the test in the framework, which is that of when there's less than substantial harm on the scale, what's the public benefit? Given the harm that's identified by your case officer and the conservation officer, if you were minded to recommend permission, there needs to be some consideration that you've either found no harm to the listed building, or that you've identified there's public benefit to justify the less than substantial harm. The report's pretty clear in terms of the impact of the cart bay infilling on the character and appearance and significance of the building and the Samuel Wyatt farmstead and the model farm. It's for you to come up, I think, and demonstrate there's no harm or what the public benefit is, and I would invite you to consider that before you take an alternative proposal. If we do get to the point where we recommend permission, then I would suggest you delegate back to me for us to agree appropriate planning conditions to make sure we get the detail right, because the detail when we're looking at listed buildings is clearly a matter that needs to be given some consideration, and also to manage matters like ecology. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So I'm going to open up the debate again. Councillor Dowd.
Thank you. I would say that actually enclosing those bays would help protect the structure of the bays. They're not open to the elements, and so they won't degrade over time as much as if they were open, without a significant detrimental effect to the building. So that's part of my reasoning for refusing the refusal, if you like, that I think by and large, on balance, it keeps the integrity of the building. You can still see that they're bays, but they're being protected from the elements. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rickman.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we all know that this is a very sensitive issue, but nothing stays the same forever. And that's why I was very pleased to local member, Councillor Hayward's comments there on the ground. I believe that this application for this building at this time is probably as good as it gets, actually. It's quite sensitive about the history of the building and taking it forward to give it a future. So I don't find it now that difficult to have a very good argument to say I think this is a good application. And I would support it, Chairman. If you like, yes.
Do we wish to continue the debate? We'll need a seconder then, Councillor Dowd. I won't come back to the speakers because we know what you think. So we will go to the vote, which is now to grant, but it will be delegated to the officers to sort out final details on that. Do you wish to say which details?
Detail for planning conditions, Chairman, and I would suggest we've covered matters such as ecology and the implications to making sure the protected species in the building are appropriately mitigated for, perhaps details on specifically the joinery and how the glazing is going to be installed in these cart bays, as well as the other joinery, the bits of the proposal that your case officer said is okay. We're going to need those details to make sure that the importance and significance of the building is preserved. So fairly standard listed building conditions, but rather than repeat them verbatim, I think if you can delegate that to us, we'll make sure the building is appropriately protected.
There we are then. That's going to be delegated if you grant it. So we're proposing to grant. Been proposed by Councillor Rickman, seconded by Councillor Dowd, and this is to grant. All of those in favour, please. 4. Those against? 3. I've abstained. Okay, so that's been granted. Thank you. And we hope we can work well together to get it absolutely spot on. Thank you. The next application, of course, is for the listed building. And we will have to change, well, we can vote on the refusal. Do you want to say anything?
Chairman, if I can, a little bit similar narrative to what I gave you a moment ago, bearing in mind what's happened on the previous application. If we're going to vote differently to the recommendation and implications now for the historic character and fabric of the building, because you're looking at listed building consent, the same tests apply with regards to the act in your development plan. And my advice is, again, for completeness, there should be some narrative and some debate from you on the lack of harm or how you can mitigate the harm, just to make sure that our decision making is robust. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll come back to debate again. Do you wish to say anything? Councillor Dowd.
Yes, I have concerns about the ceiling. So I think that would certainly need to have some consideration about how the integrity of the original building can be preserved through the false ceiling.
Okay. That it? Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Rickman.
Yeah, it follows, it's night follows day. The decision we've just made is to enhance our officers to work with the proposal to get the best we can out of it. I believe that this is a sensitive reuse of the building, but we want to make sure it's as good as it can be. So if your officers could, take that in mind, we'd be very grateful. Otherwise, I still propose that it follows the other application and proposed permission.
Okay. And do I have the same seconder for that? I will come back and let you have a minute to respond to that. So if you'd like to respond.
Thank you. Briefly touch on the councillor's comment about the ceiling. We are very considerate of the existing structure. The ceiling that you see in that picture there underneath the cart bay, that is a modern addition. That's plasterboard and modern battens. Above that is modern floor joists, and above that is modern flooring in the living room itself. We're not proposing to remove any of that whatsoever. We are just proposing to hang a ceiling underneath of that. The reason for that being an ecologist note about making sure that we don't remove that ceiling in itself, because there's the potential, not that it hasn't been shown, but there's the potential that there are some bats within that ceiling space, hence why we're keeping it there and hanging a ceiling below it. But that is all modern material.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward, do you wish to say anything?
Nothing further to add, thank you.
In that case, we'll go back to the vote, which is to delegate authority to the officers to work on this one. And that's... Yes, to grant, yes. And that is proposed to grant, proposed by Councillor Rickman and seconded by Councillor Dowd. So all of those in favour, please raise your hand. We'll now go on to our next application, which is on page 47 of the agenda, 24/10788, Kelman's Cottage, Windmill Farm, Hotway Lane, Sopley. And the recommendation is to grant. We don't have any speakers, so we'll go straight to Vivian for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, members. There's no updates on this application, so I will just... Oh, no. If I can, I will work my way through the presentation. But it's not liking me today. it's not. Is it because we've gone out of sync? I will try. I'll just try and do it without showing the pictures, unfortunately. So, unfortunately, I have my version here. Obviously, we show the red site area. The local context shows the site within the grounds of the former Sopley Park Estate, where you'll find Moorlands College, the entrance to which is almost outside the district into Dorset. The access for this site on Harpway Lane is also very close to the edge of the land in our jurisdiction, with the eastern side of Harpway Lane being National Park. This is sited to the west of Harpway Lane. It's surrounded by farmland and a few other residential properties which are to the northwest of the site, also within the former Sopley Park Estate. And there is a walled garden, and this property is tucked around the corner, the sort of southeastern corner of that particular garden area. I've indicated in the presentation the existing floor plan. I don't know if any of you have actually access to that floor plan at the present time, but the area indicated as living space and a bedroom are part of the addition that was granted permission a couple of years after the original conversion of this property to a holiday let around 9 or 10 years ago. The building subject to this permission also includes an existing farm office, which is used as such. That's not part of the application to convert into a dwelling. We're just looking at the rest of the building, which is currently a holiday let, and the farm office will remain as such. The first photograph I was going to show you was the appearance of this site from Harpway Lane, where you can see it with a backdrop of trees, and you can also see the other residential properties nestled in quite a quintessentially English view, in my opinion. The front elevation of the property, there are some roof lights. It's a single-storey property. There's no capacity to go up in the roof because it's a very low-key building. There are already roof lights in situ. There's a couple of picnic tables in the little garden area to the front, which is separated by a post and rail fence, separating it from the farmland, which I understand the applicants also own and breed sheep, interesting forms of sheep on the adjoining land. Further photographs show the unusual character of the rear extension, which was designed to maintain the original kennel runs at the back of the property, hence the name Kennelman's Cottage. The surrounding garden, what is now garden wall, includes railings which were part of those original kennel runs, and the rear extension elevation shows gates over the windows and doors into the garden area, which were the original accesses into the kennel runs. So they've got a little patio garden area, which to the northwest has a very tall garden wall, the other side of which is properties in other ownerships. So, moving on to the recommendation, the application, there's no demonstrable harm to anything to continue the use of this property as a dwelling. There's no impact on the openness of the green belt. It enables the preservation of the property, which is sited within the Sopley Conservation Area, and approval is recommended. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Woods.
As the chairman recommended to me when I first started on this committee, that don't hesitate to ask questions. So I can't understand, under policy TM20, it's not recommended. And all of a sudden it's recommended. So can you explain that to me?
Yes, the proposal doesn't comply with any of the requirements or the indicating elements of TM20, because it's not an extension to an existing dwelling, it's not the replacement of an existing dwelling, and it's not for affordable housing purposes, or the applicant hasn't demonstrated that it's for an agricultural worker or forestry worker. What isn't indicated in the application, but I'm aware of, is that the applicants do own the adjoining farmland to this property and do currently operate as I say, they breed sheep. I think they've got chickens and geese on site as well. And they've done that for quite some time, as I understand it. That aside, as stated in the report, a holiday let is also C3, which is the lawful use class of a dwelling. So aside from a condition on the original approval for the holiday let, restricting it to being available for people up to 4 weeks at a time, there's no proposed alterations to the building in the conservation area. It will maintain the future use of it if holiday lets fall by the wayside, and obviously we've had COVID and that has impacted on that particular use. Also, in terms of the Greenbelt policy, there's no harm because there are no physical alterations. Traffic generation can potentially be greater than a holiday let. It can be less than a holiday let because holiday lets, people will come to the property, go out on day trips, whereas if you're living there, you don't necessarily go out all the time. So on balance, it was considered there's no demonstrable harm, and that's the reason for it coming to committee, because it is contrary to that policy.
My next question most probably isn't pertinent, but does the fact that it's changing from a holiday let to a dwelling mean it will be of more value to the owner?
I've absolutely no idea. And it's not, it's not relevant.
Not relevant. Thank you.
Any more questions? And then we'll go into debate. Councillor Dowd. Okay, so then we'll go to the vote, which is to grant subject to conditions proposed by Councillor Dowd, seconded by Councillor Rickman. All of those in favour, please raise your hands. It's unanimous. It's been granted. Thank you. Right, last application. This is application number 24/10799 on page 85 of your agenda. 7 Ivor Close, Holbury, Fawley. No speakers, so we go straight ahead with the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, members. Thank you. This application is for 7 Ivor Close in Holbury. The property is a detached bungalow within the built-up area of Holbury. To the rear of the site is the Co-op store in Long Lane. You can see here in more detail, this is the site. So we've got Long Lane here, and that's the Co-op store. So it's a close of bungalows. As I say, it's located within a cul-de-sac of similar bungalows, and many of these properties benefit from detached garages to the rear, which are modest in size and height. Number 7 has a detached garage to the side of the relatively large rear garden, which you can just see here. The application seeks planning permission for an outbuilding within the rear garden, which would include a mezzanine floor within part of the roof space to provide a first floor used as a home office. The ground floor would then be used as a gym with a shower and kitchen area. So here we can see the mezzanine floor stairs going up to part of the roof space, which become more obvious in this part. So we've got the ground floor plan, we've got a gym at ground floor, a kitchen and a shower room, circular staircase going up to the mezzanine, where we've got a home office, which doesn't come out as far as the windows to the front. You see there's a lot of glazing to this front elevation, but the mezzanine floor is set back. The proposed garage would have a pitched roof. I'll just go back. Would have a pitched roof and with a flat roof design, with a height of just under 5 metres, compared to the height of the bungalow, which is 5.6 metres. It is your officer's opinion that this would result in a very large outbuilding, which would be out of scale with the main dwelling, and the design does not relate to the pattern of development in the area, where garages have small, simple, dual-pitched roofs and modest heights. Within the large, within the front elevation, as you can see, there's a large area of glazing at first floor, which doesn't relate to the glazing below in terms of design. And the resulting building would appear, in our opinion, out of keeping in this location. So going to the photographs, we have the street scene here. This is the property, which you can just about see behind the small tree, the neighbouring dwellings. And as you can see, they've all got modest garages. You can just about see the flat roof of the Co-op to the rear. And here's it again to the front. This is the front of the building. And you can just about see the roof of the existing garage. And then beyond would be the new addition. The property has got, as I say, has got a small garage, which is shown on the plans as being retained, but obviously they could take that down at a later date. They've also got the framework of a previous garage, which they had a proposal for in 2021, which was granted permission. As you can see, they never completed the works, and that would have been a flat roof garage with a modest height. So the views across the rear gardens, this is a view to number 8. They've got quite a low wall to the rear, but it goes up higher towards the front. And to the back of the site, there's high hedging. This is from the back of the garden, looking towards the rear of number 6. So number 6 have got a small shed adjacent to the garage of number 7. You can see they're relatively low height bungalows there. And this is the rear of number 6. They've got a glazed conservatory, and behind this screening, they've also got glazed doors serving their lounge. This is a view from number 6's garden, so you can see out from there, this is coming out of their patio doors to their lounge. This is the neighbour's garage, and as you can appreciate, the larger building would be to the rear of this. And there is concern, considering the amount of glazing which is going to be to the front elevation of the proposed outbuilding, that there would be some, even though not direct views because of the setback of the mezzanine, there would be a perception of being overlooked from that amount of glazing. This neighbour also has a small patio area alongside the boundary. You can just about see there the framework of the previous proposal. So although there is going to be some impact in terms of the height of the new development, it was considered it was sufficient distance between the new development and this patio area to not cause an overbearing impact on this neighbour. The recommendation is to refuse because of its reason of its height, mass and incongruous design. It would be out of keeping in this location. And also by reason of its height and glazed gable in close proximity to number 6, the proposed outbuilding will result in harmful perception of being overlooked. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? No. Oh, Councillor Dowd.
Having that framework of the garage that didn't amount to anything in the end is quite useful. Could you give me a rough idea of how much higher this structure would be than that frame?
Yes, the previous proposal was for a flat roof garage to a height of 3.2 metres, whereas the proposal is going to be 4.98.
considerable.
to the
Thank
ridge,
you.
or the flat roof at the side, but the 2.5 to the eaves. So it gives you a perception.
And my second question is, you mentioned it was considered as far back not to be overbearing on the neighbour. That's the applicant's determination, not yours, I'm assuming.
Sorry, it was my determination that it wasn't overbearing
didn't
because
think-
because of the distance, that the eaves height is 2.5 metres and there's a distance of 3.7 metres from the boundary to the ridge. So if I show you the block plan, so the neighbours have got obviously their garden here, but it was that because the eaves is only 2.5 metres, pitching away to 3.7 metres away, that it wouldn't be overbearing on their garden area. That's my view.
Right, okay, thank you.
The surrounding properties next to this, what are they, bungalows or houses?
They're all bungalows. So as I say, the height of the bungalows is quite modest at 5.6 metres high, and the proposed outbuilding would be just under 5 metres high. So it's very, very, scale.
Right, does anybody wish to debate this? Well, the recommendation is to refuse. So, did you put your hand up?
I'm happy to move that recommendation.
Okay. And a seconder? Woods? So we'll go straight to the vote then. So recommendation is to refuse, and that's been proposed by Councillor Rickman, seconded by Councillor Wood. All of those in favour, please raise your hands. And that's unanimous, so that has been refused, and that also brings us to the end of our meeting. So thank you, that closes the meeting, and I just want to wish you all a very, very happy Christmas, festive season, whatever, however you celebrate. And
You too, Jim.
thank you. Look forward to seeing